Book 8, The Last Day, Chapter 5, The 34th Day of Planting, Part 5 of 12. Young Pear dodged and weaved and hurdled trees and shrubs and rocks. Aunt Jatesy wasn't entirely disappointed to see him, he concluded. Something in her eyes seemed excited to see him. Before, she pointed at him and said with so much drama that he nearly snorted that he was not her son. Now she could go back to the estates and tell them. Keep going, Cloudman behind him shouted. As far as you can, beyond the arrows. They're firing arrows? Young Pear shouted back as he ran through a cold stream. They were. One hissed right by my ear. Keep running. Are you on my side, Cloudy? I have to be. They're going to figure out in just a minute that I'm the one who unlocked your wrist shackles. Run! Stupid slagging soldiers! Thorn screamed, his voice echoing. How in the slagging world did none of you notice that he was running away? His screeching all the way back to the second resting station put every soldier on edge. Thorn was given plenty of space as he strode through the staging areas of the groups of hundreds that were trying to reorganize themselves. Several soldiers were retrieving the men injured by the flying arrows, and already it was known that 3 soldiers had died from the poorly aimed volleys. Thorn continued to spit and storm and thrash recklessly with his good arm as he shouted every profanity he knew and created a few new ones on his way up the stairs and into the station. Where is she? Thorn demanded as he looked around the large gathering room to see only officers. Each of the men looked nervously at each other, shrugging and twitching. Finally, Twig spoke. She seems to have left, sir, during the commotion, but I'm sure we can get her back. Idiots! Thorn shrieked. He dove into the study and slammed the door behind him. The officers in the gathering room all sagged and gulped. Only Twig had seen where Jatesy Shin had gone. His eyes darted worriedly to the front doors. Healy, what are you doing? He whispered to himself. Alone in his study, Lemuel Thorn took several deep, calming breaths and considered the past several minutes. She was radiant, absolutely radiant. And she wanted him. She just couldn't reveal it right then, but she would, once she had some time to think and realize all that he offered. It was just all too much, too overwhelming for her to be in his presence again. He had that effect on people, especially on women. When he found her again and got her alone, she would be his forever. From the window he had a view of the forest where Shin and that ridiculous Cloudy soldier had disappeared several minutes ago. Lemuel began to smile. Excellent work. He nodded toward the trees. Well done. I knew you would succeed after everyone else failed. You stay on his tail now. After all, you're his new best friend. Shem and Zadok rode their horses in an uneven trot down the mountain, parallel to the cleared path filled with now thousands of Salemites. Boscos decided to stay at the top and wait for his wife and her family. There would be no one left when they reached the bottom, Shem concluded. A few times people tried to call out to him, but Shem didn't feel he could stop today. He needed to get Calla to the site, along with Mahrree and everyone else. The horses were frothing and tiring, but he could change mounts at the bottom of the mountain. Deck probably had another beautiful animal waiting for him. Maybe that's why he didn't make it to the top. Yes, Mahrree called to the tower. That's what it needs to be. Her granddaughter and niece were up there, changing the banners on the tower to read the original black-bannered message. Much better. Now come down here before Shem returns. Next to her, Lila shook her head. We're not supposed to be messing with the banners, Mahrree. No one's even allowed up there unless they're a trained messenger. Your husband's rule. Esther Zenas folded her arms. That's what I've been saying. Yes, I know that's what you've been saying, Mahrree said, her patience running out. I've been hearing you for the past 5 minutes. Huldah, Zenas, and Tabit Brighter came down from the tower and ran over to Mahrree and the others waiting between the houses. "That was kind of fun," Tabit said. "But I feel guilty," Huldah admitted. "Well, you should," Esther declared. "Papa deserves to see that last message." Mahrree put her hands on her hips. "That up there is now the last legitimate message sent by the towers. The other one was forced by Thorn. It deserved to come down." Esther glared at her. "So you're not going to tell Papa about Aunt Jatesy?" Yes, of course I will," Mahrree said hurriedly. "Just not by the banners. Oh, Esther, you know nothing about men. It's all in the way you present the information. You saw how maddened Deck and Pato were when they went flying through here. Your father doesn't need to experience that right now. He's just coming back from battle, Esther. Putting a sword into a man's hands, that changes him. He's going to be fighting that change all the way down. If he saw that Lemuel was calling for Jatesy, he'd be ready to take up another sword." "No, he wouldn't," Huldah said. "Papa told me the other night that he didn't like being a soldier or thinking like soldiers." Mahrree took a step closer. "But he must be a soldier. It's what he was trained for, and it's part of who he is. He can't deny it." Esther shifted nervously. "But Papa won't kill anyone today." "Yes, he will. He's done it before," Mahrree said steadily, as Shem's daughter squirmed. "He must do it again today or innocent people will die. He needs time to deal with that raw emotion, and seeing those black banners is already going to be a struggle for him. He will lose his temper like you've never seen him lose it before, I promise. Why make it more difficult?" Esther sighed. "I just don't like lying to him." Mahrree flailed in frustration. "It's not lying, it's revealing the truth at the appropriate moments." "Sounds like lying," Huldah whispered to her sister. "Look," Mahrree tried again, "he's going to be angry enough about Calla if he doesn't know about that already. Then when he realizes Jatesy is gone and that Deck and Pato followed—" They all turned as they heard 2 horses on a fast approach. Mahrree bit her lip. Shem and Zadok slipped off their horses and ran over to them. "Black banners!" Shem shouted. "Get your packs. This is it." Shem," Mahrree started. No, I'm not listening to it anymore, Mahrree. I'm serious. Now." "Shem, you don't quite understand. There's a little problem." "The kitchen is clean, Mahrree," Shem roared. "Get your pack. Lilla, get the horses. Where's Calla?" He looked hastily around. Mahrree frowned. "She's not with you?" "What?" Shem spun to Mahrree. "Why should she be with me?" Esther and Huldah sent their best accusational looks at their Aunt Mahrree. "All right," she said, wringing her hands. "Here we go. Shem, did you know that Calla always wanted to see you in action?" Shem squinted and took her by the shoulders. "Where is she?" Mahrree paled. "She followed you, Shem. Left half a minute after you did." "Did you try to stop her?" Mahrree nodded eagerly. Huldah did." His daughter nodded enthusiastically too. Esther folded her arms. "But Aunt Mahrree told her to go." "You what?" Mahrree flinched. "Shem, she said it was her dream since she was 14. I mean, how sweet is that? She wanted to see her sergeant major in action. Maybe it was the spirit of your ancestor Lorexania reaching her. You know, following her husband into battle." Shem glared. "Come on, Shem. I'm going to tell my best friend, don't pursue your one chance to live out your dream?" Shem released her shoulders. "I don't believe it. She did it. I suspected she might, but—" "You didn't see her?" Mahrree pressed. Shem looked to Zadok. He shook his head. "She was probably hiding," Mahrree suggested. "And seeing the look on your face right now, I can understand why." Shem spun around. "Maybe she's coming back." "It might be better if she stays," Esther said. "At least she's up there now." Shem nodded. We talked about that last night. I told her how important it was for me to see her up there safe. You're probably right that she's staying. Her way of apologizing for following me. He sighed heavily. Okay, we'll carry her pack up there. Deck, he called, searching. When no one answered, Shem directed his glare once more to Mahrree, his patience sliver thin. Where is Deck, Mahrree? She cleared her throat. That's the other problem. How many do we have, Mahrree? She shrugged. Shem, there was another banner message. She nodded to Esther to prove she was getting to it. Esther watched her closely. Mahrree blurted it out. Shem, Lemuel sent a message calling for Jatesy to come to the second resting station. He what? But I made the girls take it down. It's my fault they changed the banners. Shem searched frantically, his panic rising. So where is she? Jatesy left, Mahrree cringed. For the station. And you told her to go too? Shem raged. No, Mahrree shouted back. I tried to stop her. She did, Papa, Huldah said timidly, alarmed at seeing her father so infuriated. She even thought about getting on a horse. See? Mahrree took his arm. I really didn't want her to go. Shem rubbed his face with his hands. How long ago? An hour at least, probably longer. Shem darted for the barn. Mahrree followed him. Shem, stop! Pato and Deck already went after her. He twisted to Mahrree. Both of them? Mahrree winced and nodded. That was all he could take. No! Shem shouted, and banged his fist on the door so hard it seemed to rattle the entire barn. The girls cowered at his fury. Several rushed over to Lilla, who was astonished. Zadok stopped in his tracks, and young Shem hid behind him. Deck is supposed to stay here, Shem yelled. Only I'm supposed to deal with Thorn if it comes to that. None of this is following the plan. We discussed this. We planned this. Mahrree bravely stepped up and grabbed his arms. You deal with Thorn? Shem, think like a general. Pull out that sergeant major again and put him to work. Does the general of one army ever confront the general of the other without one of them dying? What happened to Brill and Karna? Killed by Snide. No, Shem, outthink him, out-strategize him. Even if he holds Jatesy, Pato, and Deck as hostages, you do not cave in to him. He might be luring you to him already. Don't fall for it. We go west, right now. You need to lead this people at the last day. I'm ready to get on a horse for you right now. Shem. She paused until his angry, darting eyes finally rested on hers. Shem, she whispered, you are the deliverer. He blinked several times and finally focused on her. What did you say? Mahrree put her hands on his face to hold him steady. You, Shem Zenas, are the deliverer. I know it. Esther sniffled. But Shem stared at Mahrree. You don't know. Oh, yes, I do. When I say the words, my arms tingle. Shem, you need to do what the Creator wants the deliverer to do. Don't worry about Lemuel or Deck or Pato or Jatesy. Worry about the Salemites on the mountain. The Creator will take care of our family if you take care of everyone else. I have full confidence in that. We can wait for them until midday meal. Then we'll get our packs and go. You must come with us and go nowhere else, especially not to the second resting station. Shem's eyes softened as he looked into Mahrree's. If it's not Kala, it's you, he whispered. Either one of you says exactly what Perrin would have said to me. He took her hands in his demeanor markedly changed. I'm not so sure about the deliverer thing, but you're right. We can give them another hour, then I take all of you up to the mountain. I can always come back. Mahrree smiled and kissed his hands. But we need some more horses, she gestured to the barn. Shem saw Clark 14 resting and the small horse chosen for Mahrree. Zadok, Get up to the children, start choosing horses, have each one of them ride a horse and lead a horse back. I'll be back up to—" The sound of horses' hooves turned all of them around to see who it was. "Pato!" Lila screamed. "Mahrree, they're back!" Mahrree released the biggest sigh of relief in her life and looked up to the sky. "Thank you!" Shem ran out to the road, followed by everyone else. Pato was on his own horse, a tired animal that looked as if it was already experiencing its last day, and Jatsi and Dek were sharing Jatsi's mount. Pato slid off his miserable animal and rushed to Lila. "He's free! He's running free! He's escaped!" Mahrree stopped abruptly, and Lila screamed, "Really?" "Pato, where's young Pear?" Shem asked. "Running southeast," Jatsi laughed. "But he's running unshackled and right into the forests." Mahrree clutched her chest. Jatsi dismounted and rushed over to her. "Mother, Father's back too. I could even smell him right next to me. He told me what to say to free young Pear." "Tell me," Mahrree cried. "Tell me everything." "Jatsi," Shem said urgently, "what about Lemuel?" "Oh, yeah, a delusional maniac. Wants me to be his queen. But let me tell you about young Pear and Father and Qualipo Healy." Young Pear slid in a narrow ravine, and Cloudman dropped in next to him, panting heavily. "No one's following," young Pear grinned. "We did it!" "Phew!" Cloudman sighed. "Thank Crete, because I can't run another foot. We must be at least a mile away, maybe 2." Young Pear analyzed Cloudman, now that they were relatively safe. "So, will you tell me who you are and why I should trust you?" "Yes, I will," Cloudman said, his words flowing faster when he wasn't pretending to be a vilehead. "You're far too trusting. My brother was right about you." Intrigued, young Pear said, "Who's your brother?" Cloudman sat up and held out his hand. "Introductions first. My name is Lieutenant Nelt." "Nelt?" "Perrin Nelt, if you can believe that," he smirked. "Named after your grandfather." "Wait, what?" "Apparently your grandfather impressed my parents at some fancy dinner in Idumea," Lieutenant Nelt told him, "taking care of my brother when he was fussing so that my parents could dance. When I was born about 4 years later, your grandparents had already been lost, or so everyone thought. But my father wanted to honor his memory. He named me Perrin, but always called me Pear. I guess we're a pair of pears." "Nelt!" young Pear repeated in disbelief. Nelt smiled sadly. "The Captain Nelt you knew was my older brother." Young Pear sighed. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I was with him when he died at the border battle for Idumea. Arrows." "Yes, I know," Nelt whispered. "I was at the border battle, too. I found him after they pulled you away to bring you to Thorn. I've had a morbid fear of arrows ever since. But I also know that death is one of the hazards of our work. He knew it, too." Young Pear gestured limply. "I'm sufficiently stunned. Why are you here? Why are you helping me?" "Because I made a promise to my brother that I would," Perrin Nelt said, sounding like he regretted it. "Right before that confrontation Thorn had with Sargon, I caught up to him. He told me all about you, and he also told me to watch out for you should something happen to him. It's taken me a few seasons to catch up, but I finally found a way to fulfill my promise." Young Pear stared at him. I'm speechless." Nelt grinned. "Finally! As much as you've been going on and on about Salem." Young Pear smiled hesitantly back. "You know, you're my favorite soldier." "Of course I am. That's because I'm not entirely a soldier. I was training to be an assassin like my brother. Until, well, everything." He looked down at his hands. Young Pear rubbed his neck. "Wait a minute. You shot me with that small arrow up at the glacial fort." "Bolt. We call it a bolt." He opened his jacket to show the small crossbow tied inside. The bigger crossbows we're developing can shoot a bolt right through the body armor like Thorn wears, but those weapons are rather obvious. This small thing, it's not powerful enough to kill a man, but that's not its purpose. It's to deliver this mixture right here. He pointed to a small bottle in a hidden pocket. The bolt needs only to puncture the skin, then the liquid on the tip does the rest. 1 drop knocks you out. If the bolt is saturated in it, it kills you in 30 minutes. Young Pear blinked. Were you trying to kill me when you shot me out of the tree? Of course not, Nelt exclaimed. Just shut you up. I used only 1 drop. You nearly killed yourself that night. I spent 2 full minutes trying to target you. You know how hard it is to do that in the dark when you're standing up in a tree and I'm hiding in a bush? I fired 3 bolts before the 4th hit you. Fantastic shot, though, if I do say so myself. Young Pear rubbed his neck again. Yes, I'll admit it was. I heard 2 of them whizzing past my head. I thought they were hornets. And you're the one who said it looked like a stick poked me. Nelt smiled innocently, much like Cloudman. When you get right down to it, the bolt really is just a pointy stick. So, if you have that thing, Young Pear gestured to the small crossbow, why not use it on Thorn? Nelt sighed, long and thoughtful. To be honest, I hadn't made up my mind until recently whose side I was on. Usually my devotions lie with the richest man, so my sense of survival told me to be on Thorn's side. But my sense of honor, whatever I may have left, is telling me to be on your side. In the end, you won. And since I got to taste apple mush, obviously that was the right choice. Young Pear smiled. Apple sauce. I'm still astounded. You played a violhead so well. Something my brother taught me, Nelt explained smugly. Behave the opposite of what you really are. How should the smartest man in the world act? He pointed modestly to himself. Like a vilehead. My brother was very obvious in so many ways that no one ever noticed his subtlety. So, Young Pear squinted. He wasn't really that experienced with women. Oh, that part was true. Well, as far as I know, so much he was going to teach me, so much I never learned. Nelt looked off into the distance, his thoughts drifting like clouds. Young Pear patted him on the back. Salem girls don't go for any of the things he said in his songs. Trust me. When all of this is over, maybe we can learn a few things about Salem women. Nelt looked at him. What happens when all of this is over, Shin? Young Pear opened his mouth and closed it. I really don't know. Haven't thought that far. Nelt gave him a friendly punch in the shoulder. So let's not then. Let's think about today. What do we do first? Be careful, Young Pear. Young Pear tipped his head. See that mountain range over there? On the other side of the valley, filling up with the nasty soldiers that we're trying to avoid? Nelt said in Cloudman fashion. Yeah, I'm afraid so. That's where we need to get. Then up and over those mountains to safety. That's where the Salemites are. No, it's not, Nelt said. They're at the temple, northeast of here. Enough, Young Pear, enough. I said be careful. Young Pear pondered those words that nearly screamed in his head, reminding him that he didn't have any real reason to trust this man. He may not even be Captain Nelt's brother. He had to stop thinking like a trusting Salemite and start thinking like a spy. A thought came to him, inspired by a general. Salem split itself in 2. Half goes one way, the other goes another way. That way at least one half of Salem will survive, while Thorn attacks the other half. My family's on the west side, but we can hide out in the east with the other half of Salem until it's over. Nelt nodded at that explanation. So where do we go now? We need to head north. Maybe try to get around the Salemites massed behind the temple. Then, if there's an opening, we can try to head west. Nelt nodded again. Your land, you're in charge. Oh, that's an interesting cloud. Everyone sat around the Brighter's eating table, listening and wearing a hopeful smile. The morning had started out grisly, first with Eltana's army refusing to back down, then Shem's battle, which he described to them without much detail. But the mood in the house brightened considerably as they listened to Jatsi explain her experience with Lemuel Thorne and young Pear's sprint to freedom. Dec never once let go of her hand, even though she frequently used it to make a point. When Jatsi finished, Mahrree shook her head. Young Pear's running free, and Po Healy is a sergeant major. I never would have imagined it. Especially when Perrin and I were chasing Po down and throwing him into incarceration, Shem said. Mahrree, Jatsi, and Peto smiled, but only for a moment. Shem turned his mug in his hands, pensive. And our dear assistant Anno succeeded. Lemuel thinks everyone is on the opposite side of the valley. I knew Anno could do it if he just concentrated, but he always got so flustered every time you pushed him in his testing, Mahrree. She smiled sadly. Anno had definitely been her most trying student. He told me once he wanted to do something brave. Now he has done it. This will give us the time we need to get those who are still trying to get to the ancient site, Peto said. Lemuel's a little earlier than I anticipated. I thought he wouldn't make it in until at least this afternoon. They fashioned ropes out of what looks like bedrolls, Jatsi explained. They're using those to climb over the walls. Rather cleverer than I expected, Shem said. I wish there was a way to get Anno out. Mahrree put a hand on his. Shem, he knew it was a one-way trip, she said quietly. Lemuel won't keep him alive any longer than he needs him. He may already be gone to his wife, she finished in a whisper. He was looking forward to being with her again. No one faithful will miss the last day, Dec reminded them. Anno will be there somehow, Shem. I know, Shem said, with a faraway look of planning in his eyes that made Mahrree uncomfortable. Peto scoffed. Bedroll ropes. Guess they still have an ingenious man or two among them. Lemuel needs to be kept distracted until at least tomorrow morning. I saw some families leaving from Eltana's army this morning. They just need more time. But if Thorne sends up a few scouts to the temple and they find no one there... Yes, a distraction, Shem said airily. Mahrree squeezed his hand. Don't think it, Shem, whatever it is. Not thinking anything, Mahrree. Shem was an excellent liar, so she glared at him. So did Esther. Well, Lilla said, standing up, we don't have much time left. We should get something ready for midday meal, and you men can go get the horses. I suppose we'll just have to hope young Pear is still a fast runner, she said with a tight smile, her eyes swimming. Peto sighed and rubbed his eyes. Is it really only midday meal time? It's got to be closer to dinner. Lilla kissed him on the head. You poor thing. I don't know when you've had such a long day. What made you get up so early anyway? Peto closed his eyes. I don't know. I just couldn't sleep anymore. Too many things to do and think about. I really should be out there looking for young Pear, but somehow knowing he's on the run has made me so tired. Then rest a little while. The Creator's probably trying to keep you safe, Lilla said, patting his hand. 200 pieces of gold for you, remember? You'd have to ride through all those soldiers to reach him. Her voice cracked. I'll try to go slow with getting your food. And she headed to the kitchen with Jatsi. Peto put his head down on the table. You don't think Lemuel will stall the army while I get a little nap? I've been on a horse since well before dawn. Dec chuckled. Take your nap, Peto. Zadok and I can get the horses while Shem stays on guard here. From the kitchen they heard Jatsi's voice. I don't think you need to worry about that. Come look at the children. Everyone, including sleepy Peto, went to the kitchen window. They smiled as they saw Hogel and Sentia Shin, Yanali and Atli Brighter, each riding a horse and leading 3 behind them. They were bringing 16 very obedient horses. Ah, Peto smiled. We still get miracles, don't we? First we get back with Jatesy safely, then young Paris escaped, and now we have horses." Shem nodded. "I'm beginning to feel more and more confident about this day, Pato." Sergeant Beavid had never been so uncomfortable in such a soft chair. He squirmed, watching the door to the study. A few minutes ago, out had come the 4 guards who had been hunting for meat in the cellar when Shin escaped. General Thorne had shouted at them for 10 full minutes, and when they sulked out of the study, they were somber and dejected. Beavid didn't know if it was because Thorne had just reduced all of them in rank and pay to privates, or because they had never found any mead. Beavid suspected the latter. He was next. Outside on the front porch, the rest of his security team waited just as nervously. Hammer, Iron, and Teach had just been located, having been forced by an over-eager lieutenant colonel into one of his groups. Buddy, Pal, and Reg had been trying to keep guard around the station, but the constant flow of soldiers had prevented them from noticing Shin escaping, even though nearly every soldier in the vicinity had stopped to watch the latest installment of the Shin and his woman drama unfold at the back porch. Snarl had been discovered gorging himself in a pantry off the kitchen, and Cloudman had run away with Shin. It was obvious he was the one who had unlocked Shin's wrist chains. It must have happened early this morning, when Beavid gave him the key to undo the chain around his ankles. Beavid shifted again in his chair. Just how long did it take to put together an execution squad? There were thousands of men with swords, many of them eager to use them. But, like a cat watching a mouse suffer before killing it off, Thorne must have been delaying this deliberately. He already ran the speech he would hear in his mind. "Most incompetent soldier ever produced by the Army. Not one of your security team noticed? Do you even know the definition of security?" Beavid avoided looking at any of the officers rushing past him to look out the windows, then going back to the plans in the eating room. Not as if he would be involved in the attack on the temple. His body would be food for some stray animals by dinner time. Just get it over with already. The door to the study opened, and General Thorne nodded once to the sergeant. Beavid got up shakily and walked into the study. "Sit," Thorne ordered. Beavid did so, in a hard chair set by the desk, his mouth dry. Thorne sat in the desk across from him. "What do you have to say for yourself, Beavid?" The sergeant fought the trembling in his voice. "I have no excuse for my gross incompetence. I could never apologize enough, and I realize that I will be punished. Please, sir, may I beg that it be swift?" To his surprise, the side of Thorne's mouth lifted into half a smile. "That was rather well said for a mere staff sergeant. I suppose I underestimated you. I did not, however, underestimate your incompetence. In fact, I was counting on your failure." I don't understand, sir." "Of course you don't. How could you? You've been serving for what, not yet 5 years?" Thorne leaned forward on the desk. "You really think I would trust a silver chip as valuable as Shin to a mere staff sergeant and his so-called security team?" Beavid gulped, realizing he had no idea what was going on. But it seemed to be another game of dices, and Beavid had never been able to master the trickery of that game. Thorne sniffed at his astonishment. "Ugh, why in the slagging world would I assign a vilehead, a fogged-up Gracina idiot obsessed with clouds of all things, to such an important team?" I wondered that myself, sir," Beavid choked out. "Yes, you are incompetent. Cloudman is no vilehead. He was training to be an assassin. He's Captain Nelt's brother." Beavid squinted. "The Captain Nelt of There Once Was a Girl from Grasses?" "Yes, and many other overly descriptive poems esteemed by the soldiers." Thorne frowned. "Captain Nelt was an assassin working for Major Jordan, but his younger brother, Lieutenant Perrin Nelt, was an assassin in training working for me. It's because Lieutenant Nelt was a traitor to his brother that I was able to foil the attempt on my life at the Idamean border last year. Lieutenant Nelt slipped me a note about what kind of weapons the assassins have and what their plans were. So I made sure I wore my leather body armor and shifted all of the angles when Sargon and I met. Beavid ran all of that over in his mind, knowing that he better not ask about the vague reference to angles and body armor. It's that kind of loyalty, Thorn continued, that earned Perrin Nelt a position on your team, and will also earn him his command of any village in the world once we finish here. Beavid tried to keep up. So Cloudman did allow Shin to escape, but you knew about it? Thorn sighed. I don't have all day, Beavid. I have a battle to fight soon. Yes, of course. None of your team got anything useful out of him, but I knew Nelt would. Once Shin tired of the feeble attempts of the rest of your team, Shin was never going to divulge where the Salemites are hiding. That's what I've really wanted to know. Mahrree gave me everything else but not the location of the temple. She was withholding that for when, I don't know. But this isn't her game of dices. During the past few weeks, I could feel Shin's desire to go home growing, and I knew once he saw this place, he'd do all that he could to get back to his family. That's what I want, Beavid. His family. That's exactly where he's running to, and I have the most capable spy and assassin in all the world running with him. So, I didn't mess up? Beavid asked with the smallest amount of hope. Of course you did, you slagging idiot! Thorn pounded the desk. But I counted on you to mess up. Yes, sir, Beavid whispered, still trying to figure out if any of this was good news. Thorn's shoulder twitched. Is your team outside? Yes, sir. All of them? Yes, except for Cloudman. I mean, Nelt. Thorn rolled his eyes. He's still Cloudman, Beavid. Can you remember that? Beavid was confused, but answered, Yes, sir. Good, because when we apprehend Shin at the temple, after we let him witness the execution of his family, he will be shackled and once again under your guard. It took Beavid a moment to answer. You mean Yes, or do you want to be executed instead? Beavid shook his head vigorously. No, sir, I welcome the opportunity to redeem myself, sir, but execution of his family? Thorn was already writing down something on a stack of notes. Yes, once he witnesses that, he'll be far more docile and easy to control. Broken will and such. Beavid seriously doubted that young pair would become docile. Quite the opposite. But it was clear that Thorn wasn't going to believe anything other than what he imagined, what was convenient. Beavid saw so many holes in the logic, he wasn't sure which one to point out first. But he also knew doing so would rapidly end his life. Still, he dangerously felt the need to mention at least one item. But, sir, his mother this morning, she didn't think he was hers. Thorn shrugged that away. She needs some time to come to accept the idea. For so many years she was sure he was taken away from her, then to see him so suddenly, the shock of it all. He continued to write. She'll come around. Young Pear was right. Thorn was ridiculous. So what family is he running to, then? That woman's or the people who raised him? Thorn put down his quill with an irritated sigh. Doesn't matter. Still trying to sort it all out, Beavid said, But, sir, the other night he was talking of his family here. He mentioned many small children, nieces and nephews, babies. Those won't be executed, will they? Why not? But, sir, babies? Thorn tilted his head. Sergeant, is this too hard for you? Beavid did his best to sit at attention. No, sir, not at all. Then get back to your team. Tell them to intercept Shin and Cloudman in a few hours, and tell them to be prepared to let nothing, I mean nothing, distract them again. and don't you ever but-sir me again. Dismissed." "Yes, sir." Beavid stood up and saluted. To his team waiting anxiously on the front porch, he said, "Follow me." He looked around for a suitable place to talk, and eventually decided the barn was the best bet. Several soldiers were already in there, stealing a nap in the straw, but Beavid led his team to a quiet corner. "We're going to die, aren't we?" Reg trembled. "I'm not dying." Snarl fondled his long knife. "Thorn will die first. All of this was poorly planned." Buddy and Pal looked at each other with worry, and even Hammer and Iron grew pale. Teach flopped down on the straw. "I'll go first. I'm so tired, I don't care if I die now. None of this is worth it." "Look," Beavid said in a hushed tone, "none of us is dying." "Why not?" Reg said, almost sounding disappointed. Beavid looked into their faces, realizing he didn't know who in the world, or in Salem, he could trust. But he had to try someone. "Thorn's been lying to us, and I'm starting to think he's genuinely unstable. I may not be the brightest man in the world, but there are so many holes in his thinking, I'm surprised his shrunken brain hasn't fallen out of one of them yet." Teach snorted in appreciation. "And I'm also beginning to believe the only man we should have ever trusted has run away." Teach sighed. "Cloud Man?" "No," Beavid hissed. Teach sat up in surprise. "No?" "What I'm about to tell you goes no further than here. If it does, Reg, we will be executed. How many of you have heard of Captain Nelt? Well, you've heard his songs, I'm sure, if you've spent more than 2 days in the army. It seems he had a brother, and they were both in the Assassin's League." "Wait," Pal broke in nervously. "Assassin's League? They're not real. That's just a story to scare children to be good, right?" His voice drifted off when he saw the very somber expression on Teach's face. "They're real," Beavid said quietly. "Ever since the time of the kings. Maybe from the time of Idamia's organization. My grandfather told me that there's always been a secret group who eliminate undesirables. They used to be a core section of the Garters. I know what you're going to say. A lot of the Garters were just thieves in black. But at the core, there were always true Garters. The ones who took the oaths and were trained and did the bidding of the highest bidder. King Coral and his descendants, as well as Chairman Mal, all of them had assassins, often as undercover soldiers." Reg was holding up a finger in question. "Like Shemzinas?" Beavid paused and looked at the barn which housed them, new storylines intersecting with the ones he knew and throwing everything he thought he understood into the air like chicken feathers. "Like we were told about Shemzinas, but honestly, I don't know anymore, man. If Shemzinas was from here, then—" He exhaled loudly as he looked at the bewildered expressions of his team. "You're all thinking the same thing I'm thinking, aren't you?" "I don't think so, because I'm thinking," Hammer started slowly, "that I have no idea what to think anymore." The rest of the team nodded in perplexed agreement. "Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too," Beavid admitted. "Anyway, I do know this. Assassins have been around for generations, but now they've been the kind of killer-for-hire bunch, not loyal to anyone but to whomever pays them the most. The generals have been quietly using them for years to take out annoyances." "It's been my observation," Teach said, "that Thorn takes out his own annoyances." "Well, he can't do everything everywhere," Beavid said irritably. "That's why he's retained Lieutenant Nelt." Buddy, who wasn't quite following along yet, likely because he'd gone deathly gray at the reality of assassins, raised his hand timidly. "Who's Lieutenant Nelt again?" Beavid rolled his eyes. "Who's missing from our little group, Buddy?" "What's the count now?" Mrs. Jordan asked as she continued to watch the soldiers stream over the wall and into Salem. One of the men sitting next to her checked the tally. 41,000. Mrs. Jordan nodded. Certainly sped up their rate by adding more ropes. Maybe they brought them from another wall further up the canyon. Captain Custer, standing next to her, rubbed his hands. How much longer? If I'm this itchy to get going, so will be the others. Good. Use that itchiness. Maybe another 2 hours. Just keep thinking itchy thoughts. Use Thorn to scratch them. Custer paced in front of the window. We've been waiting over 5 hours now. Mrs. Jordan sighed. War is an art, and like any art, patience is necessary. You don't need to rush it and have a sloppy conclusion with results you don't want. You need to watch the signs, pace the progress, make the move at precisely the right... Not according to them, Custer said, pointing out the window. Mrs. Jordan looked below. The fighters from several barns were slipping silently out and starting in a stealthy run. Their target was a group of weary soldiers who had just arrived and were lining up in the rows between grapevines, temptingly less than 100 paces in front of the house where Mrs. Jordan was stationed. No! She cried. She took off running down the stairs. By the time she rushed out the front door, she already heard the familiar clang of steel. She stopped to see the soldiers with swords drawn, over 100 of them engaging nearly 200 men with pitchforks and hatchets. Idiots! She shouted. There was nothing else to do now, that all strategy was gone. She grabbed the rope hanging on the bell in the front porch and clanged it as the signal. Then she pulled her husband's long knife from its sheath on her waist and looked around for her first victim. The battle for Salem had begun a little early. Major Twig had been watching Salem in front of him, evaluating where the next batch of soldiers should be placed so he could give that information to Healy when he saw the movement in the west. He grabbed the spyglass out of the lieutenant's hand and focused it. General, he started. Thorn had just gone to the eating room and was pointing out something on the new map Anno had completed. General, Twig said louder, staring through the spyglass. Under attack, General, we're under attack! Thorn ran from the eating room. What? The other lieutenant with the second spyglass nodded. I see them, just a bunch of villagers outfitted with pitchforks and hatchets, but Slagging Creek, they keep coming. There's thousands of them. They've been hiding in the buildings. Thorn ran to the front porch and pointed to his trumpeter. Sound attack, to the west. Immediately the trumpeter sounded the pattern call. Horses! Thorn bellowed. I need a horse. Anyone find one yet? A colonel shook his head. Plenty of cows, but not a single horse or mule or donkey anywhere, sir. Keep looking. I can't ride into battle on a cow. He ran to the window where Twig was still watching the progress of fighters. Every house, General, every barn, they're pouring out of them like an infestation. They must have been waiting all morning. We've been setting up the soldiers right in front of them. Crete, it's an ambush. Steady, Major, the general said, putting his left hand on Twig's shoulder. They can't be too successful with just farm tools. Our men are more practiced. Not most of them, sir. Most of them have been in the army for only 3 weeks. 3 weeks is more than any of them, Twig, Thorn said confidently. He took the spyglass from the other lieutenant, balanced the end on a window pane, and watched the battle. Soldiers were racing to get into the fight without waiting for orders. Officers ran behind them shouting out commands that no one could understand. Thorn scanned the other side for signs of anyone in command of the Salemites. They had even less structure and discipline. He grunted in satisfaction. Battle is chaos, and whoever side is more chaotic suffers the greatest. It was the most untidy battle he'd seen in years, but already he was confident the army of Idumea would prevail. Salem was so desperate they were even using women as archers. A few of their arrows were successful in hitting their targets, but most were not. Salem is a city of peace, Thorn scoffed quietly. Look at your people, Private Shin. Did you really think I was gullible? Why do you think I brought so many expendables? Shem, inspecting the newly arrived horses in the barn, stopped and listened. He shushed Deck, who was pouring water for the animals, and a moment later ran out of the barn with Deck following. "Hear that?" Shem said. "In the distance, horn blasts." "What's it mean?" "Years ago it meant attack." Deck let out a low whistle. "Eltana's army is striking?" Shem exhaled. "Oh, bad timing. Lemuel's probably still got a third of his army behind the wall, well protected. They can just wait it out." "Maybe Eltana got tired of waiting." Shem rubbed his face. "You want to go see," Deck said, "don't you?" Shem glanced at Deck. "Mahrree told me to think like a general, like a sergeant major. The commander in charge of defense should know what the offense looks like." "Good thing your wife isn't here." Shem grinned. "Are you kidding? She'd be wanting to ride along. Good thing she's up and away from the action." Deck smirked. "Want me to tell Pato?" "Not until he wakes up. The poor man needs another hour of sleep, don't you think? He looks so comfortable on your sofa." Already he was backing up to the barn, eyeing the new stock. "I'll say what Calla would," Deck sighed. "Be careful. Don't get involved. Don't stay out long." "1 hour," Shem called, jogging into the barn. "Tell the women to clean something in the meantime." He snatched the reins of an already saddled horse. Deck waved goodbye. "None of this is going according to plan, Shem," he whispered to his retreating figure. "None of it." And that is the end of part 5 of 12 of chapter 5. Thank you.